So the max or min is based on which way it opens. So for 11, the A value is positive, which means it opens up. That's why there's a minimum. Okay, and then to find the minimum, you can find the y-coordinate of your vertex. So this is opening up. This one is opening down. Okay, and then for this, it's just the opposite of B over 2A. Okay, so your x value is 1. To find your y, you can just, again, you can plug it in, or if you want to use the table on your graphing calculator, that's fine too. This number is lower, so to find this, you can just do g of 1. So 1 squared minus 2 times 1 plus 1. So 1 minus 2 plus 1, which equals 0. So your minimum is the y-coordinate. Let me finish going over this now. And then the domain for both of these is all real numbers. That's because you can plug anything into a quadratic and get an output. And you do have to do this in set builder notation. Okay? So it's x such that x is an element in the real number set. Okay? So that's what your domain always is going to be. Now your range, because this is going up, it's all of the values that are greater than or equal to 0. And then yes, question about 11 or the.
I put like the coordinate point, so I did like 1, 0. Would you accept that, or do I just?
No, not for this one. So your minimum or maximum does just have to be the y-coordinate.
Okay.
And then for 12, it's the same thing where you do opposite of b over 2a. Okay, and then I got 3 over 2 or 1.5. Plug in 1.5. Evaluate, and you'll get 8.25 or 33 over 4. Either one is acceptable. And then domain is all real numbers x, such that x is an element of the set of real numbers. And then your range is y, such that y is less than or equal to 8.25. Or again, if you do the 33.24, that is fine. The story problem, or first questions about 12 for me? All right, the story problem is asking you to find a maximum number of albums. And so when that happens, the maximum, that says to me I have to find my vertex. The maximum number is always going to be the y-coordinate. That's your output, okay? Now, with the function, they tell us that t is the time in days. So on which day were the most albums sold, that's going to be your input. That's going to be your x value. So when you do the opposite of b over 2a, you will get 45. And then to find the maximum albums, you're going to plug in 45, which will give you 182,250. So this is, really, I should say, on the 45th day, right? The max amount of albums were sold, and the max albums were 182,250. Oh, also, for 11 and 12, I showed you how to do this manually, but what's the other way that you could do this? I showed you using algebra, but you could also do this what? Yeah, you guys could use your graphing calculator for that one. Okay, so let's do that for 11. So I had x squared minus 2x, and I can't tell you what buttons to push during the quiz. So if you want to know how to do this, I would do this with me. You would go to graph, and then do you guys remember how to get to the calculation that you need? Second, stat. Oh, just kidding. Stat. Over to, oh no, second calc. Here we go. All right, so second calc. Do it again. Second, and then this is your calc. And then this one's a minimum, so you do have to use the minimum. And then do you guys remember how to do the left bound and the right bound? Okay, so once you go to the center, you just go a couple to each side. And really, for me, it just depends on the cursor, like how many I go. And you don't even have to go the same amount on each side. I just like to give my calculator room to work. So I'm telling it, I'm finding the lowest point between those two. I'm trying to make the best guess. And then once this is the maximum, this is what I have. Oh, good. I'm glad this happened. Because sometimes, do you guys get a strange looking answer like this? See how it says e to the negative 12th? This is scientific notation. And what that means is 2.05 times 10 to the negative 12. Do you guys remember how to write that as a number? That's what the e means. Yeah. So if you did that, okay, then wouldn't you just have a bunch of zeros in between, in front of it? So what does that round to? It rounds to 0. So anytime you see the e to a negative power, it's going to round to 0. And sometimes my calculator does that, and then sometimes, depending on what my bound is, it doesn't, because I did this last hour. And guess what? It didn't do that to me. Let's see if I can get it to say 0 this time. And then my guess. Yep, see? So again, anytime you see the e, it is going to be 0. So e to a negative is 0. Okay. All right, let's do the zeros of the function. So the zeros of the function, kind of like what we were just talking about. Maybe sometimes you don't see it on this table. So I highly recommend that you use the table in your graphing calculator. And once you use the table in your graphing calculator, you can see the points that you need to construct this. Really, you're just plugging in -4 to find the value. You plug in -3 for x to find the value, or you can plug in y squared plus 5x plus 6 to see what you get. I'm actually going to do the second one, which is negative. Make sure you use the negative and not the minus. Plus 4x plus 5. And then for that one, if I just go to my table, remember that my zeros happen when there are zeros for y. So the numbers that they gave me, they skipped some numbers. But look, see how the y coordinate is 0? So -1 is a 0. And then I can keep scrolling until I find another one. Yep, at 5, there's my other 0. Now really, if you graph this with the points they gave you, you would see that these are the x-intercepts. So remember, zeros are x-intercepts. They are also called roots. Zeros are x-intercepts. They are also called roots, which is what we're going to have to find for the next 2 sections. All right, so you guys can, I'm going to, here, this is how I want you guys to write this out for 16 through 20. So you need to have the or in between them, because we don't know which one this is. I do have to see your factoring, so you can see like some of them I went over already with different classes, and I showed my work. Okay, so all of them should have your work for these. If you're doing the negative, if you have a negative in front, you're going to factor out that negative. That is like a GCF. If you take out a negative, when you're simplifying, it's really like you're dividing everything by what? A -1, right? So this divided by a negative is x squared. -6 divided by a negative is plus 6. And then -9 divided by a negative is the 9. And then from here, you have x and x. Keep the negative in the front. What multiplies to 9 but adds to 6? They're both positive because you have a positive here and a positive here. And then you have to set it equal to 0. So I do need to see that. Now, can you see these are the same? So you don't have to set them equal to 0 twice. In both cases, you're going to get -3. And then if this is a -1, if you set that equal to 0, there's nothing to solve for. So that's why your only answer is -3. Most of these have how many answers? 2. The only ones that have one answer is because it's the same answer twice. So you should have 2 answers for each unless it is a repeat. You should have 2 answers for each unless it is a repeat. Okay? Do you guys have questions on 16, 17, or 18? All right, 19 and 20. Your first step is to move everything over on one side. You can choose. So for me, I like keeping the x squared term positive. So I subtracted 12x from each side, and then I factored. That was a perfect square trinomial. So I got x equals 2/3 twice. So I only need to write that once. This was the difference of two squares. Make sure you write them both out. So this is what I need to see at the very least. I need to see the factoring, that it's equal to 0. Set each one equal to 0. And then if you're really good at doing this part in your head, I'm fine with that. Just please know to check for those simple mistakes, right? When you move it over, the sign has to be the opposite, okay? All right, and then for 21 and 22, when you are writing the factored form, the form is x minus that number. So if you have -2, it's x plus 2. If you have positive 7, it's x minus 7. Because if you set x minus 7 equal to 0, your x value is 7. Okay, so it is really the reverse of what we did up here, right? This was my answer, this was my factor. Okay? And then you're going to FOIL. So x times x is x squared. You have -2x, -7x, which adds to -5. 2 times -7, -14. Same thing here. -1 plus 8 will be +7. Yep.
I got f of x equals x squared plus 2x minus 7x. Do I just have to add them together?
You should have, yes, the plus 2x minus 7x, yes. Combine your like terms.
Okay.
Yep. And then 23 was an extension of what we did. So again, I just need to see that you tried something for 23. 23 was a challenge problem, so you won't have a question like this that you would have to answer on your quiz. But I just wanted to show you what we know how to do now that we know how to do all this stuff. So you're given this equation where t is the time in seconds, and h is the height in feet. It says how long will it take for the javelin to hit the ground. So if it hits the ground, that is when the height is 0. How long means you are going to solve for t. So all you have to do is set this equation equal to 0. You have to plug in 0 for the h. Okay, and then you solve for t. So you just subtract -4.48 from both sides. You'll have -0.08 t squared equals -4.48. To get the t by itself, you divide by the coefficient. And then what's your final step? What would you do to get t by itself? Nope. Do what with it? Nope. No square it, it's already, there you go, take the square root. Okay, and then I changed that to positive because a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and that will give you approximately 7.48 or 7.5 seconds. Okay? Like I said, I'll be after school today if you want help with the factoring. You're going to just finish the front side of the factoring worksheet, and then you can check it at home, okay?
Will you post like the answers?
Yes.